This sermon that you're about to listen to comes from one of the most beautiful but heartfelt and agonizing psalms of all of the collection of the book. Psalm 137 is a lament hymn where the supposedly the author was in captivity during the Babylonian exile during about 587 BCE, and the psalmist shares about how difficult it is to sing the Lord's song when you feel that you're in captivity. And I'm sure as you contemplate this sermon, you remember times in your life when you've been so overwhelmed with grief or pain or burdens in your life when you didn't feel like singing the Lord's song. And so I hope that the sermon will touch your heart and that God will meet you in the places of your greatest need. And I encourage you, instead of keeping the song down within your spirit, to let the song out and sing it, even when you feel like that all of life is closing in around you. This morning, I wanted to share with you the Psalter lesson, which is from Psalm 137. And we invite you to follow along either on the screen or in your Bibles. We hear these words. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our harps, for there our captors ask us for songs, and our tormentors ask for mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." But how could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember you, and if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they said, tear it down down to its foundations. O daughter Babylon, you devastator, happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. May God add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of these holy words. You may be seated. Have you ever been in a time in your life when you felt like that no matter how hard you tried, that you cannot produce a song? For centuries and centuries, we people who are of faith journey, we have been people who like to sing. We sing because it gives us an opportunity to express our faith in a different view. Sometimes people find it easier to sing the Lord's song when the words don't come to their mouth very easily. But God has always placed a song in the hearts of God's people. One of the wonderful things about being the community of faith is that God gives us this tool to utilize to express our faith in profound ways. Even though some of us are not gifted singers, there's something marvelous that happens when we as a collected body of faith raise our voices together and sing the Lord's song. Again, I ask you, have there been times in your life when you couldn't sing the Lord's song? Times when you were doing the very best that you could just to get up out of the bed in the morning, to plant your feet on the floor and walk, putting one foot in front of the other one, much less singing the Lord's song. It's extremely difficult to sing the Lord's song when what you are experiencing in your life makes you feel as though there is no joy in your life to sing any kind of song, much less the songs of the Lord. We, like the psalmist in Psalm 137, are sometimes forced to drop to our knees, sit on the floor, and just have a big cry about it. And that's all right. There's nothing wrong with us expressing our deep-seated pain to God and to one another. Many of us this morning can identify with the times that we felt as the psalmist did, when he could not utter a word, he could not walk another step, and all he could do is just to sit down and cry. Have you ever felt so hopeless in your life that all you could do is to sit down and cry? Psalm 137 begins by the psalmist proclaiming, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and we wept." I suspect that when the psalmist talks about the rivers of Babylon, he was speaking about the canals that were built from both the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers that flowed into the city, giving them a source of water for both themselves and their crops and cattle. But he explains his predicament that when he found himself by the rivers of Babylon, all he could do is just to sit down and to cry when he remembered Jerusalem or Zion. If you read it very closely, and I invite you to read it when you get home slowly and in depth, you almost feel the passion that jumps off of the page at you when you remember the plight of this psalmist. He remembers that when he was back in Jerusalem, that everything was going great. He had his family, a house to live in, food to eat. He had a temple to worship in. And he had everything that one could imagine, friends surrounding him, and a wonderful community of faith that were brought together. But as soon as the Babylonian exile happened in 587 BCE, everything dramatically changed. The Babylonians came into the city of Jerusalem and they ravaged the place and destroyed it. The temple where they had gathered, some of them on a daily basis to worship and to pray to God, was completely torn down. And to them, where they placed the emphasis upon this building that was consecrated and constructed and erected for the worship of God, once that is torn down, for many of them, that symbolized that God was no longer in control, that for many of them, God had been taken away from them, and God was absent. Some of their homes were utterly destroyed. Some family members and friends were killed, and those who were most able-bodied were taken from Jerusalem as captives to go to Babylon, and they were forced to participate in harsh labor, all given to them by the hands of their enemy. And so when the psalmist said that when he remembered Zion, he just was able to do nothing else but to sit down and to cry when he remembered the homeland. To him, Zion was much more than a physical location. For him, it was an ideology. It was that place where they experienced joy and happiness and family and community and an atmosphere where God kept them safe and secure. And they offered their praise and worship to that God. But now the psalmist found himself in a very different predicament altogether. He and some of the members of his family were probably separated. Even if he had a son that was able-bodied and was taken into exile, chances are that they weren't in the same place working, and he wondered what happened to his wife and the other children and his friends that were left behind in the city. He felt totally devastated. Have you ever been so devastated in your life that all that you could do is to fall down on the ground or the bed or the floor and weep? And so the psalmist has this impassioned song that he wrote. I want you to be reminded that one of the characteristics of Zion is that they would sing the songs of God, reminding them of God's faithfulness and God's provision to the people of Judah. But the psalmist now finds himself proclaiming in the lyrics of this song, he says, "And there it was by the rivers of Babylon that we took our harps and we hung them on the branches of the trees." What a horrible thing to be so devastated and broken in your life when you are a musician and you know that the songs have been taken from you. No longer did you experience or feel the joy of God in your life, that you were able to play the harp beautifully in worship of God. And so now you resigned yourself that you took the harp that you had utilized and played so many times before in Jerusalem, leading God's people in worship, and now all of you who were instrumentalists just took your harps and you hung them on the branches of a tree. Felt hopeless and helpless. The psalmist continues, he said, "For it was there that our captors asked for us to sing the songs And listen, he said, and our tormentors, those who wanted to torment us, they asked us with mirth to play one of the songs of Zion. I was reminded that as the psalmist proclaimed those words, it was an opportunity for him to express feelings of discontent with his enemy because they wanted him to play the songs of the faith for an entertainment purpose. But for the psalmist who played his heart before God, those songs were more than just songs. They represented a part of who he was. He couldn't just flippantly play the harp while he was in the present condition. And how dare his captors ask him to do so when they didn't even believe in the same God that he did. But when the psalmist writes the words, our tormentors even ask us to sing the songs by mirth. He was saying not only are they asking us to sing these songs and play these songs for them in order to entertain them, but they made them a laughing stock. It was almost as if they were tormenting them, saying, sing us one of those songs about God, because it doesn't look like to me that it's doing any good for you right now. You are in this present condition and you are our slaves, and how well is that going for you right now to sing the songs of God? He was very much chided, and just sing us something that we can laugh at you and laugh at your God because you are in captivity. Where is God now? And how has that gone for you to sing the songs when you're in captivity? Have you ever been so devastated that you could no longer sing the Lord's song? This question that the psalmist raises in this beautiful lyric of his is a question that we must ask ourselves all the time. How could we sing the Lord's song while we are in a foreign land? When the psalmist asked that question, he was talking about more than just being in the land of the Babylonians, and more than just being physically forced to participate in harsh labor. He was talking about a mindset. Zion was more than a place, but it was a mindset, a way of life that it represented all of their faith experiences and their journey. And now, how could they sing? How could they sing that song while under foreign influence and captivity and brokenness? How could we sing the Lord's song while in a foreign land? This morning I want to say to you in this worship service that you and I are faced with the same dilemma in our world now in the 21st century. Our world is so inundated with hatred and anger and violence and war, of people fighting over political ideology or religious identity. And we have somehow forgotten how to relate to one another one-on-one. God, forgive us. Could it be that God is asking all of us this morning to be the singers of the Lord's song in the midst of all of this tragedy? all this negativity to sing the Lord's song. And the Lord's song is one that is comprised not of doing your own thing or excusing our own sinful behavior or our own inconsistencies. The Lord's song is one that sings a word of hope and peace and love and joy in the midst of all of the chaos around us. How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? The psalmist continues with a very powerful image. He said, if I forget you, Jerusalem, if I forget the way things are back at home and the way we had it really well with God, let my right hand wither up and let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. That was such a powerful image to someone who was an instrumentalist and a musician, because when he was saying in essence that if he forgot God and the ways that God had established back in Zion with peace and prosperity and goodness, that may his right hand wither, the same hand that he had used on many occasions to play the beautiful harp in worship of God. If he forgot God, he was praying that his right hand would wither up, or that he would no longer be able to play the harp. But it was not only that, he said, and also may my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. He was no longer able to sing the song. So when he uses this imagery, he was praying in essence, God, if I forget all that you have made me and the situation around me back in Jerusalem, may I no longer be able to play my harp in worship or to sing your songs. May I just be silent. It's interesting that another image we get anytime that the Bible speaks about the right hand, it is symbolic of a position of power. And so I am thinking this morning that when the psalmist says that let my right hand wither up, when he had forsaken and just totally neglected and given up and been defeated, that as the right hand symbolizes power and authority, one of the images I get in my mind is that when he abandoned his singing the Lord's song, that he lost the Lord's power and authority and influence over him. He had abandoned God. And then the final verses, I want you to listen to these very closely because they seem very cruel. The psalmist prays, he says, remember, O Lord, he prays a prayer to God, remember, O Lord, the Edomites and the day that they destroyed us. He said, happy are those who will repay you for what you have done to us. And happy are those who take your little ones and they smash their heads against a rock. What violence that is. That is something that we do not expect from a person of faith, because we are called to be the peacemakers, to not express our hostility or our violence toward one another in that fashion. But I want to paint the picture for you this morning. How many times have you and I said things or done things out of an impassioned situation? How many times have we spoken violently or negatively or done things they're uncharacteristic of ourselves and particularly of anyone of faith? Oh, the human feelings, this impassioned emotion that came through. In times when you and I have been wronged by another person or someone around us has been hurt by a person, our first inclination is to get retribution, to pay them back for what they have done to us. And if they have hurt one of the little children, either ours or the people around them, our first thought is, somebody's got to make them pay for that. And even though that is a way of our releasing that and getting the anger out in the open, that perhaps it will not eat us up on the inside, it also gives us an opportunity to not bottle that up within us, to just let it go. And I remind you at the beginning of that section, the psalmist, even though he is saying these horrible words in spontaneity because of his situation and the hurt and the pain that it has caused, deep down within his heart and in his mind, he knows that he has to give this to God. And so he prays, "Remember, O Lord, the Edomites, for when they have harmed us." That's a good word. You think that that's trying to teach all of us this morning that it may be in our human nature to want to be retributive when it comes to people hurting us or doing things that harm us? That it's okay that we serve a God who is big enough to hear all of the negative speech and sometimes even the negative behavior that you and I exhibit? That God understands our initial reaction of wanting to get even, of being angry, of wanting to make things right on an equal level. But we are reminded from Psalm 137 that the proper response after we've gotten over the initial shock and the initial passioned emotions of this hurt and this confusion and pain, that we must leave it in the hands of the divine and allow God to take care of it all. How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Many of you may have come to church this morning and you know that life has stolen the song that was planted within your spirit. It either happened because of the loss of someone who is dear to you, the loss of an interpersonal relationship, the loss of a job, bad grades in school, children that are rebellious. The list goes on and on and on. A bad health situation. You don't feel like singing the Lord's song when you're in the present condition of captivity. It is our human nature sometimes to shut down when life throws a curveball at us, when life gets too tough that we cannot even step another foot in front of the other one, much less stand on our own or get through the day. So we fall to our knees and we shed tears of brokenness. And we fail to sing the song. I want to say to you this morning that even though it is inbred in our human nature to stop singing when life doesn't go our way, I want to encourage you this morning to let that song continue to be sung. Let it come out. God planted it there for a reason. I believe sometimes that we forget that singing the Lord's song is probably more valuable to us when life isn't going so grandly than it is to sing it when things are going marvelously well. Don't ever let anyone steal the song that God has placed in your heart. And even when life is chaotic and uncertain and filled with pain and difficulty, and we don't even know how we're going to make it through the next day, when the burdens of life have knocked us down, and the only thing that we can do is fall down on the ground or the floor or fall across our bed and weep bitterly, remember the song. Don't ever forget the Lord's song, to sing it loudly and proudly. Because it seems to me that the song of God is more valuable to us when we have been knocked down to the ground and we know that there is no alternative because we cannot make it on our own. And it is in that time when we are knocked to the ground and unable to stand for ourselves that we recognize and give our allegiance that we are dependent upon God. So how could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? I say to you this morning, it is not a question of how can we, but will we sing the Lord's song when we're in captivity? And I want to say to you that the thing that has gotten me out of my captivity, whether it is a physical captivity or an emotional or a spiritual one, is to be reminded of the Lord's song. Because in those lyrics of God's song, it develops the characteristics of God. It reminds us of God's faithfulness. And it reminds us of God's goodness. And the strength that God gives each and every one of us to blurt out the lyrics, even when we feel that we cannot do anything else. I encourage you this morning to never stop singing the Lord's song, even when you feel that you're in captivity or that you're residing in a land that is not your own. Don't stop singing. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.